This is Steven Diego, and you're now tuned in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about FOMO and what that could mean in your life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breaking Down the Breakdown. You already know. You already know what this is. You already know what the deal is. This is Steven Diego, in for another edition of this super, I was going to say awesome, then I realized how kind of cringe that is. I don't want to be the one to call my podcast awesome. I do like my podcast, don't get me wrong, and I like that I'm able to talk to you guys on a weekly basis now. But awesome, I mean, sure, maybe if some people out there think so, but anyway, time to kind of bring it back down to earth. Welcoming, guys. I hope everyone is doing well. We recently just wrapped up the whole series on anxious attachment styles, and honestly, a lot of people reached out and was like, you know what, I felt like that was me in a nutshell, and I don't know how to feel about that. I really don't, just because I felt really bad that so many people can relate. But at the same time, I'm glad that a lot of you are coming out of the woodwork and realizing that this is actually more of a normal thing than usual. But for today's episode, I don't know if you guys read the titles, I don't know if you guys read the descriptions, but I was thinking about it, and I really wanted to follow it up with another different type of attachment style. But for that one, I do not want to speak on it because I do not have it. So I'm waiting for a guest for that one. And I have a few candidates who can openly talk about that. But there is one thing that for me, I feel like not a lot of people talk about in a mental health sense. And if I think of it and relate it closely to my experiences as a person as opposed to an alien, right? I honestly feel like this thing really impacted my life in a couple of ways. And I don't even know where to begin with this, because this is it's a very broad topic, because I feel like everybody at some point has experienced FOMO, right? For those of you who don't know what FOMO is, that's okay. Don't worry, guys. Don't be like, oh no, I'm too old for these terms. I'm sure a lot of people know this term. But for those of you who don't, it is fear of missing out. And a lot of people associate FOMO with, parties, which, because largely it is, when people are like, oh, god damn it, I have FOMO now because I gotta work. But we have to actually step outside, take a big step back and look at the bigger picture of what FOMO actually does look like in our lives, especially if it affects us negatively. And by that, I mean, look at how you function on a day-to-day basis, right? I'm not here to shame people for going on social media, looking at people's stories, looking at other people's stories, looking at, random posts, especially vacation posts, and having FOMO and, wanting to work hard to go on vacation. And there is no shame for that, because, at the same time, we all need a vacation. That's cool, right? I think what I'm trying to touch upon here, and for some of you who, might be triggered by this, but put yourselves in a position when you were a little bit younger. For those who are a little bit older, maybe my age, maybe if you're in your 20s, you can relate to this perfectly, because I remember this in my 20s. I'm going to give an example of what I used to do when I was in university. My first year and second year of university was really bad for me. Socially, it was fantastic. Academically, it was fucking terrible. And a lot of people will say, you know what, it's because you don't have discipline. You have a lack of discipline. And I do agree, right? But a lot of it was actually fueled by FOMO. It really was. I always had this FOMO of not making great friends throughout my university years because I cannot go to one party. So I would force myself to go to a party. I would force myself to get obliterated, because in my mind at the time, everybody loved me when I was drunk. Not a very good thing, not a very good excuse, but that's what I always did. And because of that, a lot of things suffer. I almost lost my job back in the day because, I wasn't able to show up for work because I would always be hungover. I almost got kicked out of school because I could keep up with my studies, because every Thursday night, and I don't know if you guys know, if you guys are from Toronto, you guys go to York, every Thursday night, there's this place at York Lanes called Sakura. This is a throwback. I don't even know if that exists still. And they would always have karaoke on Thursday nights. Lucky for me, I don't have classes on Fridays. But I would always make it a point to go there every Thursday night. Right? Get obliterated, crash at a friend's place in res, and on Friday, instead of using it to catch up on work or homework or whatever, I will go party with people outside of York, and so on and so forth. And that was my university life, right? And actually, I had like a mental health episode that happened because of all the partying, right? And it could actually be related to my OCD, because at the time I didn't know either, because I had a very similar experience back when I was younger. I don't know if I talked about this when I first started the podcast, but it dates back to that because of all the partying and all the drinking that I was doing and all the drugs, of course. It's just weed, but like, especially back in the day, it was still a drug, right? But again, I'm not here to shame people for doing these things, right? I'm just here to let y'all know that maybe, in essence, you guys aren't actually doing the things that you're doing because you truly want to do them. Instead, you might actually find yourself doing things because you have FOMO. You have a FOMO. You have a fear of missing out. Like, partying is just one example. Let's talk about vacations, for example. I know so many people who have a lot of bills to pay, right? But, that's none of my business, right? So I'm just making it clear right now. I'm not here to chastise anybody. These are conversations I've had with friends in which they decide to prioritize going on vacation over paying a bill of sorts. And it's not a bad thing, only because, what? I always say this too, right? There are things that you do for yourself because it would actually help you, because that it would actually make you feel better. That mentally it'll place you somewhere better. And when you come back, especially from a vacation, you're energized, you're motivated because you want to go on another trip later on, right? There's that aspect of it. There's that aspect of putting off X, Y, and Z to do something else because that whatever it is that you need to do or would like to do is actually going to propel you forward somewhere good, right? But then there's also the flip side, in which, because you've scrolled to too many stories of your peers and seeing how everybody's having fun going on vacation, that you are willing to put yourself in debt. You are willing to, forego X, Y, and Z that you really need, that your partner needs, that your family needs, because you want to also experience what everybody else is experiencing. And who am I to judge you on that? Who am I to say that's fucked up? I'm not here actually saying that's fucked up. I want y'all to understand, if you look at it, if you feel guilty about doing that, if you came back from this trip and you weren't energized, if you came back from this trip, from this vacation, and it did not do what you thought this vacation would do, it's the equivalent of any other mental health disorders out there. And I'm not saying like, oh yeah, because a lot of people when I associate it with mental health disorders, they think negatively. It's not about that. What I'm trying to say is it's equivalent to people thinking they have a problem. Like, let's say for me, for the longest time, my therapist thought I was psychotic, so they gave me solutions for my psychosis, right? They gave me pills, they gave me medicine to help ease with my psychotic breaks. But I was never I never had psychosis, right? It was one psychotic break, and then everything else was intrusive thoughts because of my OCD. So they were essentially trying to fix a problem I never had. And this is equivalent to that. It's like putting on a Band-Aid on an injury, not a cut. That ain't gonna do much. It's more of a placebo effect at this point, and that's not even working, right? So that's all I'm trying to say here. Because there are so many people who do things out of fear of missing out, not because they actually want to do it. And for a lot of you sitting there and going like, wait, that's why we want to do it, because we have a fear of missing out. That is actually, that's a gray area. That is actually a gray area. Not a lot of people have thought about FOMO as a form of anxiety, but it is. Because there is that anxious feeling inside your body that you want to be a part, not necessarily specifically of what your friends are doing, but you want to be a part of that online presence in which you're able to relate to what people on your feeds are doing. See, not many people think that way because people have downplayed what FOMO actually is. And for a lot of people, they're like, well, you're putting too much thought into FOMO. But ask yourselves, how many times have we made decisions, rash decisions that came back to bite us in the ass because of FOMO, and it never actually got us anywhere? There is a huge difference between the two, and we need to be able to separate that. We need to be able to recognize, are we doing things because of this versus are we doing things because of that? One of the things that people don't associate FOMO with is how it can actually worsen social fears. One of the many things that I experienced when I was going through my FOMO stage of, not being able to party was that, what if people that I considered close with, starts hanging out with other people, and because I'm not able to go to like 3 parties in a row, they stop asking me to hang out. Doesn't that sound kind of familiar? And unfortunately, it still does happen. There are people where you don't hang out with them 3 or 4 times because you said no 3 or 4 times in a row, and they stop asking you because they think that you're just not about it and you just don't want to do it. But that is not the case, right? You just can't. So many people, they associate this with that. They associate this with what might happen, what's going to actually happen. And this is a form of FOMO. They are going to miss out on this friendship, not realizing that this might not be a friendship they want to keep anyway. Why would you want people around you that's going to replace you just because you actually have other priorities? Why would you want to keep relationships which sees you prioritizing your own self, like work, your finances, your mental health, and says, well, because you have to do that, I don't really hang out with you. And then you start to feel bad about yourself. That's just not it. That is not healthy. And this is what we need to steer away from. This is what we need to steer clear from, right? So many times it actually leads to depressive states for people. And they don't realize that, because I don't even know how to begin with this one, but there's been instances in which I've seen it happen people burn themselves out trying to please other people, trying to be around because they have FOMO. They want to be in the photos. They want to be in the conversations. They hate it when they go out to lunch with their friends and they don't know what they're talking about. It's a very real thing, right? No one here is chastising you for feeling that way. That's not it at all, right? But if this has that much of a negative effect, negative impact on your mental health, on yourself, you have to start asking the right questions. First of all, what happens if I don't ride the wave that my FOMO wants me to ride? What happens if my fear of missing out is actually quantified and I realize that the friends that I have now are not actually my friends, right? So it gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is why I say, I've said it from the very beginning, I'm not here to chastise y'all for having FOMO. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for having FOMO and acting out on it, right? If anything, I'm just here to kind of remind y'all that much like any cognitive distortions that we have, I don't want to say FOMO is a cognitive distortion, right? It is a feeling, right? But right now, I know that they're trying to study more about the negative effects of FOMO. There is a study going on right now with FOMO and social functioning in terms of, especially for young adults. People are starting to feel a lot lonelier. Sorry, sometimes I can't speak. A lot lonelier, and they feel that they can't connect with others. Right? And a lot of it is because they feel like they're not around. And then it's just a cycle that they ride on, right? So, these are things that are still being developed. They're still studying these things. And so this is why I wanted to talk about this today, because majority of us, most of you who are listening to this podcast are pretty much, not that young. Not saying you're old, you're just not as young. You've been through it. And even if you are young, even in your 18s, 19s, 20s, right? You've been to high school. It's almost like when people go on trips and you can't go on that trip. Case in point, me. There were so many trips in high school that I missed because financially my family couldn't afford it. We were poor. And then they come back from the trips, and I find that a lot of people are closer to each other because they had something that happened on that trip that bonded them together. This is where my FOMO actually stemmed from. And the pendulum for me had swung the other way, that I made sure any social event in university, I was there because I didn't want that happening. It exposed a lot of my insecurities. It exposed a lot of my fears. Like, I didn't want to be alone. And I've always felt like I was alone. But with the pendulum swinging all the way to the right, I have now been actively sacrificing fragments of myself just to try and fit in. And I don't mean try and fit in because, I was pretty cool. Like people like me, I don't know why. I mean, I'm grateful for it. Maybe because I was nice to them. I don't know. But, a lot of the friends that I met at university actually liked each other. Like, there was no drama. I think that was one of the best things about the group of friends I had in university. Shout out to y'all. There was literally zero drama, and there was a huge group of us. The dramas only occurred in relationships, but we were out of that. I was grateful for that. But, in essence, it shouldn't have mattered because I wasn't doing this to try to fit in. I was doing this because I wanted to not be alone. I wanted to feel like I had people to fall back on because it was something that I thought I never had when I was growing up. And because of that, instead of going to therapy, I decided to ride the waves of my FOMO instead because, this was a solution, right? And a lot of us do this. As human beings, we learn to adapt to our environments, adapt to the situation, and we try to make solutions for ourselves, whether it is the right one or if it's the right one for now. And, I would argue, there are a lot of people that would say, sometimes, when you make executive decisions like that, you don't realize that it hurts you in the long run. Yes. But what the fuck are you going to do? Sometimes we don't know where to look, right? For answers in the beginning. So, I think this is where I differ with a lot of people who probably do mental health podcasts, right? And this is what the basis of breaking down the breakdown is. I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to try and solve your problems, right? I'm here because I want to talk about experiences that some of y'all might actually be able to relate to. And be like, oh shit, other people are still figuring this out. And this happened like a decade ago. Almost 2 decades ago. And people out there are still trying to figure themselves out and try to make sense of what happened, right? So, I just wanted to kind of address that. But going back into FOMO, a lot of us actually end up foregoing so many things in our lives, within ourselves, that we could learn to manage just by riding that wave. As I've spoken before, right? Especially with the group activities and the partying. Some people are not able to prioritize things because of FOMO. And for a lot of you who might not be able to relate to this, you can sit there and be like, what kind of person are you to not be able to just say, I'm not going to go party because this is more important? And if that's the case, then I implore you to please re-listen to some of the episodes of this podcast, because I feel like a lot of my message then got lost in translation for you. People are different. So many people suffer through so many different things. The suffering is universal, but the way that we suffer is very unique to ourselves. So please just try to be kind and compassionate when you're listening to these episodes that might not, make sense to you. And instead, use this as a tool to look at your friends who might be going through what I'm saying when it comes to making bad decisions because they don't want to miss out on things. And try to ask yourselves, how can I be there for this person? How can I be there for my friend? One of the biggest things that I have met a lot of people who were actually international students. And at least 2 of them I've spoken to. It was a very interesting conversation because it actually wasn't their decision to come to Canada to study here. They had a lot of things going for them in Asia, but their parents had FOMO for them because so many of their friends' children were going abroad and coming back, right? And to become seemingly super successful. And it was easier to find a job. And this is where, for me, there is that gray area, right? Where is it FOMO or is it actually a smart decision? But because of this FOMO, it is not you that's being affected, it is your children. Their lives are being changed because of your own decisions, right? Because of your own FOMO. Well, my kids should be doing the same thing they're doing because I just want the best for my children, which is valid. Especially if we live, Southeast Asia, for a lot of us, we do believe that going to the US or Canada, I don't regret it, right? My life also changed, but I don't regret it because I did have a lot more going for me here. But I'm talking about this because I want y'all to think about that, right? I know a lot of you are listening from Asia right now. And if you are within the age range of thinking, my friends are actually immigrating somewhere else, maybe I should too. Ask yourselves, are you only doing this because you're seeing everybody else around you do it? And you almost feel pressured to do it because you have FOMO? Or are you willing to do this because these events are teaching you that it might actually be better for you to start a life elsewhere? Because I know so many people who actually did that, thinking that their lives were going to be insanely better being here. And then when they got here, they realized how different and difficult it actually was. And they ended up going back home. And no shame, they tried, right? Did they regret it? A little bit. But the regret wasn't so much them coming here and realizing that. The regret was they actually bet on everything being here. That when they got back, it was just a little bit difficult to adjust back to what it was like. All I'm trying to say is that intent is everything, right? And this is where FOMO comes into play. One of the defining moments for me when it came to confronting that for myself was being able to step back and ask myself, because I am raring to go to certain events, but I know that I need. Here I go again. This is what happens when I'm like, I did not eat, and my Filipino accent comes out sometimes. Sorry, guys. Not sorry. Proud of being a Filipino here, but there are certain moments where I had to ask myself, am I forcing myself to do things because I'm afraid that if I miss out on this opportunity to be around people, or if I miss out on this opportunity to be outside my house, that I won't be able to talk to anyone about this coming forward? Or do I really want to go there because for me, it's very important? Because there is a different motive for me to go. Not just because, oh, I want to see my friends, or like, oh, I really want to see this, but rather, for me, this is enriching and this is what I need. It all comes down to what we need. It all comes down to what it is that we actually think and feel and know would be enriching to our souls and to ourselves. It's so funny I'm saying that because sometimes people are like, are you saying partying can be enriching? Fuck yeah. Are you kidding me? I'm one of those people where I actually don't like missing out on weddings. Not because FOMO, oh my God, I'm not going to be in the photos. No. Not because, oh my God, it's an open bar and there's really good food. No. Because for me, especially when it's people that I care about, I want to see my friends on that one of the happiest days of their lives. I want to be there to experience that because that brings me joy. There will always be FOMO attached to that. Of course, you have a fear of missing out on that. But I'm not going because of FOMO. I'm going because that also is enriching for my soul. That also is something that allows me to experience joy. And that's just what I want to leave you guys here with. It's quite a silly topic, but if you think about it, if you actually dig deeper into it, so many things in our lives, so many decisions we've made were influenced by our fear of missing out. And it is never too late to take a step back and ask ourselves, moving forward, are our decisions so heavily influenced by FOMO that it doesn't matter if it's actually detrimental to ourselves? But, again, it's still something very new for us to discuss. I understand that a lot of people are probably going to sit there and start thinking, wait a minute, for real? But I was talking to a friend earlier, a very good friend, a special friend. And, when I asked him about, should I make an episode about this? He drove home a really great point. Because I had asked him, I said, you know what? Should I make an episode about FOMO? Because I want to talk about how so many people actually alter so much of their lives and schedule just because of it. And you know what he said? He said, FOMO is a robber of joy. And he gave the example of his schedule being wide open for years and has received little to no invites. And that is another thing to think about. How many of us actually end up waiting by the phone, making sure we're not making plans with ourselves in the hopes of other people coming through and just being like, oh, yeah, totally, come through, right? And we end up, at the end of the day, feeling like, oh, well, fuck. Even though it's not the truth. It's not that nobody likes us. It's not that nobody wants us to be around. It's not about that. Instead, we can't even think about, well, shit, like maybe for them, it's because they're actually doing their own thing, right? But that feeling is valid. Because we had that fear of missing out on a great time with great people. See, that's another thing to think about. I wish I had more time to talk about this. Or maybe on another episode we can revisit this. Or maybe I can ask somebody, one of you people, to come through and talk about your experiences with FOMO if you'd like. Remember, you can email me, breakingdownthebreakdown@outlook.com. You can also find us on Instagram now, right? Breaking Down the Breakdown Pod. I think that's what I got to double check this. Breaking Down the Breakdown Pod. I was right. I don't have a lot of followers yet, but you know what? I will be uploading clips there every week. I try to. But thank you for listening in. This was such a oddball topic, but I felt like it was timely and I felt like it needed to be discussed. Remember, be kind, be compassionate, be awesome towards other people and to yourselves. You never know what the next person is going through. And as annoying, as irritating, as frustrating as people can get, always remember, at some point you've been in the position in which you wish people just kind of looked at you and said, you're okay. Just to completely catch you off guard and make you realize, I'm doing this to myself. It's just a little bit of kindness. But this is Steven Diego. Thank you so much for listening. I love you all. And I'll see you later. Goodbye.